Hi everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. In this video, we're going to cover part of this article from the Church News. A bunch of people sent this to me. It's called Sarah Jane Weaver, 5 years after the Rome Italy Temple dedication, the church is glimpsing the fulfillment of that hinge point. You might remember President Nelson said that that was a hinge point in the history of the church. And we've done a bunch of videos about it. We've explored this concept. And in this video, we're going to talk about growth. It seems to me, and I'm going to show you why I think this, it seems to me that the church expects to grow rapidly over the next few years. So we'll cover this article as well as why I think the church is expecting major growth soon. Before I do that, let's just look at the Flood the Earth Challenge. In case you didn't see my last video, this is where we're at. So we have one new person that got baptized, which brings us to 41 since we started this challenge in December of 2022. And we have 8 new reports of people meeting with the missionaries. That's a pretty big number. Of course, I haven't been updating this every day like I should, so I'm going to try and do better with that. It's hard. So for the month of March, we have 1 baptism and 10 people meeting with the missionaries. We have a total of 8,367 copies of the Book of Mormon that have been shared. We're trying to get to 10,000. The goal for the channel is to share at least 10 copies of the Book of Mormon. So please try and hit that number, and incredible things will happen, I guarantee you. And then we have 927 people that have joined the challenge, and we're trying to get to 1,000. So if you're new to the channel, please consider doing this. Share a Book of Mormon however you want. An easy way to do that is with the Gospel Library app. Go to Scriptures. There's a button for you to share the Book of Mormon app, which you can then you send that link via text or email or direct message or however you want to send it. You don't need physical copies of the Book of Mormon anymore. So please consider doing this. And once you do share a copy of the Book of Mormon, let me know in the comments or send me an email, and make sure to include this word, #flood, because that's what I search to find your comments, and it just makes it easier. Okay, so back to this article. This came out on the 14th of March, so that was like 6 days ago. During an interview in Rome, the ancient and great city where 2 millennia ago Peter and Paul preached and died, President Nelson called the dedication of the Rome Italy Temple, quote, a hinge point in the history of the church, end quote. And then he continues, things are going to move forward at an accelerated pace. The church is going to have an unprecedented future, unparalleled. We're just building up to what's ahead now. Now, that's not the end of the quote. Okay, this comes from an article in the April 2020 General Conference. This is by President Nelson. And the name of this article is called The Future of the Church, Preparing the World for the Savior's Second Coming. And of course, it makes sense that he would have written an article for this particular issue, the April 2020 Ensign in Liahona. So here's the part that we just read in the Church News article. And then it continues. Eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, the things which God hath prepared for them that love him. Remember that the fullness of Christ's ministry lies in the future. The prophecies of his second coming have yet to be fulfilled. Let me just pause right here, just so that there's no misunderstanding of what he just said, because I know some people are going to want to be like, oh, see, he said all these different prophecies about the second coming that haven't been fulfilled yet, and so therefore we know that we're not close. No. He's talking about prophecies of his second coming, as in Isaiah prophesied about the second coming, Joseph Smith prophesied about the second coming, the Savior himself prophesied about his own second coming. So the prophecies of his second coming, the second coming, have yet to be fulfilled. We are just building up to the climax of this last dispensation, when the Savior's second coming becomes a reality. Okay? We are just building up to the climax. And he said this back in April 2020. Let's go back to the Church News article. Okay? Here's that stunning picture of all 15 at the dedication, dressed in white, in the Rome Italy Temple Visitor Center, with the Christus, and then statues of the original 12 apostles in the background. This was an incredible event. This was a big deal. Okay. We've talked about the fact that Rome, that's the headquarters city of the Catholic Church. And so you just think about the implications of that after all this time, we finally have a temple in Rome. So it's significant, right? The church is growing in strength, and many other Christian churches are starting to decline and decay and break up, and you have schisms, and you have this movement of people that are starting to leave organized religion and go non-denominational or just private with their beliefs. So, all right, continuing. After the photographs, President Nelson looked forward with characteristic energy and optimism. The many historic firsts of the weekend were, quote unquote, only the beginning, he said. The church now has 335 temples that are dedicated, announced, or under construction. President Nelson has announced 153 of those temples, or 46% of the total temples during his more than 6 years as president of the church. Okay, let's stop there because that is phenomenal. Almost half of all the church's temples have been announced by President Nelson. That is astounding. And like she points out here, it's only been 6 years. Okay, so I have a few spreadsheets pulled up. Let's look at this one. This is my spreadsheet called Prophets Stats, where I have each president of the church right here in column B. President Nelson is the 17th president of the church. And in column C, I have the number of temples that they all announced. And you can see it's pretty dramatic when you look at past presidents of the church. So if we go all the way back, sorry, now we're getting into apostles. If we go all the way back to Joseph Smith, he announced 2, right? The Kirtland Temple, which is now back in our possession. And I think it's part of this whole hinge point and things accelerating and only the beginning. So the Kirtland Temple and the Nauvoo Temple, and then you have Brigham Young that, announced the Pioneer Era temples. And then the next 3 presidents of the church did not announce any temples. And then Joseph F. Smith with 2, Heber J. Grant with 3, George Albert Smith, none, David O. McKay, 7, Joseph Fielding Smith, none, Harold B. Lee, none, and then Spencer W. Kimball with 31. So at that time, that would have been pretty extraordinary to have 31 under his presidency. And remember, it was Spencer W. Kimball. David A. Bednar talked about this when there was like this devotional for CES, personnel. He talked about the fact that it was actually Spencer W. Kimball that came up with the concept of smaller temples. A lot of people give credit for that to President Hinckley. And President Hinckley did build like even smaller temples and many more temples, but it actually started with Spencer W. Kimball. So you have 31 for him, 9 for Ezra Taft Benson, 3 for Howard W. Hunter, and then Gordon B. Hinckley, a whopping 78 during his presidency. And I remember when that happened and how extraordinary I thought that was. These were the years like that I went on my mission and I was a teenager, and I could tell that big things were happening. It was mind blowing. And then we got to Thomas S. Monson with 45. So at that point, he had announced the second most number of temples in the history of the church. But then you get to right now, and President Nelson has announced 153. The only person that's gotten into the triple digits. Again, if you didn't like, so let's go like this. If you were to like delete this right here, okay, say that you were living in the 80s or the 90s with Ezra Taft Benson, and you were given this spreadsheet, and you're like, okay, there's going to be 4 more presidents of the church after this, and this is how many temples they're going to announce. You might wonder what's going on with that 4th president. Like, what? All of a sudden, 153, what is going on at that point? Has the second coming happened? Is it like right before the second coming? You might have those kind of thoughts. And you might be right, because it may be just right before the second coming. We'll have to wait and see. So that is pretty astounding. Okay, let's go back to the article. The church now okay, wait, I already read that. This week, as the church celebrated the 5-year anniversary of the dedication of the Rome Temple, the church also opened the doors to the new Urdaneta, Philippines Temple and the refurbished Manti, Utah Temple. I highlight 5 years because I really think that this 5-year window that we've experienced is significant. I more look at the fact that in the April 2019 General Conference, that's when President Nelson gave that talk called Come Follow Me. He showed Paradise, California, like a picture of it, burnt down. He gave warnings about making sure that you're sealed to your family and that you're worthy of that sealing. And he quoted the scripture that's all contracts and bonds and associations, they're all null and void unless you're sealed, unless it's been sealed in the temple. I'm just paraphrasing the scripture, of course. He read it there in April 2019, and then he read it again last conference, October 2023, just before this conference. And this conference will be the 5-year mark, or 5 years since the Come Follow Me talk, where he said time is running out. And we have this other thing with the Rome temple. So I don't know. For a lot of us, it draws our mind to the Book of Mormon and Samuel the Lamanite. I don't know that that's going to be the case, that the second coming is going to happen now, but it could. In my mind, it could. I'm not in the camp of, no, this hasn't been fulfilled. We know that because blah, 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 blah. No, I think things happen in natural ways, and we'll be surprised how things are fulfilled, or possibly how quickly they'll be fulfilled. Okay, so continuing. Late last year, on Sunday, September 17th, 2023, the church marked the first time 3 temples were dedicated on the same day. The Brasilia, Brazil, Bentonville, Arkansas, and Moses Lake, Washington temples. Yeah, I did a video about that. That was really interesting. There's more details, but just do a search on my channel for 3 temples and you'll find that video. Interesting that it happened on the 17th. Again, President Nelson is the 17th president of the church. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that. And at the close of October 2022 General Conference, President Russell M. Nelson announced 18 new temples, including 4 in metropolitan Mexico City, Mexico. I have an article pulled up. Let's see, which one is it? It's this one. Just so that there's no confusion. So this is from KSL.com. Sunday's announcement is the second highest number of temples announced at one time in church history, behind only former church president Gordon B. Hinckley's pronouncement of 32 new temples during the April 1998 General Conference, though he did not list specific locations according to church public affairs. President Nelson also announced 20 new temples during the April 2021 General Conference. So, as far as number of temples at the same time, President Nelson is currently in the number 2 spot. President Hinckley did 32, and President Nelson has twice announced 20 temples at the same time. So it'll be interesting to see with this next General Conference, could it get back up to that? Of course it could. Anything's possible. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think he's going to surpass the 20? Do you think he's going to surpass the 32 by President Hinckley? Honestly, I don't know what to expect at this point because there's so many unexpected things going on. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the fact that the church has the Kirtland Temple again. That is so prophetic. It's literally prophetic. I did a video about that just a little while ago. So I wouldn't be surprised. I really wouldn't if he announced 33 or more new temples. We'll just have to wait and see. Okay, so let's get back to this. Oh, and as far as this, these 4 metropolitan Mexico City, Mexico temples, when he announced those, he said that they're going to be doing that. They're planning on doing that with other large cities where it's hard to get to the one temple that's there because of travel time. So we may see that in this next General Conference. Okay, continuing. Individually, each announcement and dedication of a house of the Lord is remarkable. Collectively, they are fulfillment of President Nelson's prophetic vision that form a quote-unquote hinge point in the history of the church. Things would move, quote, forward at an accelerated pace, end quote. Quote, let us never lose sight of what the Lord is doing for us now, said President Nelson in October 2022 General Conference. He is making his temples more accessible. He is accelerating the pace at which we are building temples. He is increasing our ability to help gather Israel. That's interesting to think about when we think about Elder Treadway, what he said when he said, President Nelson said there's only 2 more things left before the second coming, gathering scattered Israel, and then the second coming. So obviously the temples are a big part of that. Continuing, he is also making it easier for each of us to become spiritually refined. Okay, and I think that's all that I have from this article. There's more, but I'll put the link for this article in the description box below. So make sure to check that out. We have this article. So now we're going to look at some interesting things that have been said. So this is from the 15th of March, 2019. President Nelson calls Rome Temple dedication a hinge point in church history. Go down here. Elder David A. Bednar of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles said, quote, everything in the restored gospel of Jesus Christ focuses on him and ordinances and covenants, period. End of sentence, exclamation point. And that is what we'll take all over. End quote. He said this marks, quote, the beginning of something very majestic. Okay. The dedication of the Rome, Italy temple. This marks the beginning of something very majestic. And President Nelson has already highlighted the fact that this experience here is a hinge point, not just for the church in this temple district, but in all the world. So Elder Bednar, highlighted that, added to it. Here's some more pictures. There's the temple. It's a really pretty temple. And then it's also stunning to think that President Nelson met with the Pope. He's the first president of the church to have done so. And, they brought him a gift, the Christus, like a small replica of the Christus statue. By the way, YouTube just put out this affiliate program, and I'm participating. There's a bunch of LDS products that are part of it, so you can find that in the description box below. And one of them is a 3-inch Christus statue for just $17. So if you're interested in that, look in the description box below. I think that's interesting. Well, I like that because usually Christus statues are pretty pricey. So if you're on a budget, but you want one, I found one for you. It's in the description box below. But anyway, he met with Pope Francis. I also did a video talking about the fact that after this visit, I think it was a month later, that's when the Notre Dame Cathedral burned. It burned, and then this year, I can't remember the exact date, I think it was in February, the same day that the steeple of the Notre Dame Cathedral was revealed or finished, was the same day that the last capstone on the Salt Lake Temple was put in place. There are many more details to that, but I can't go over that here. Do a search for Notre Dame Cathedral. Those were some of my most, in my mind, some of my most fascinating videos I've ever done. So I feel like there was something to that. There was also a video I did where there was a statue of St. Peter in Argentina that got hit by lightning. The key fell out of his hand. And, just look that up too. Statue of St. Peter, or look up key, and you'll find that video. Because during the same time, there's a picture of President Nelson where he's standing with this statue right here of St. Peter here in the Rome, Italy Temple Visitor Center, where he's holding that key, he's acting like Peter's like handing him the key, basically. Just really interesting thing that happened. Okay, so then we have this. This is actually from the year before, November 1st, 2018, President Nelson's social media post. And he said this: "We're just at the exponential phase of growth." And as far as I know, this is the only place where he said this. I don't know if this shows up anywhere else, but the only place that I found it is here in his this social media post. Think about that. We're just at the exponential phase of growth. That means he's indicating that he expects the church to like really, really grow if we're just at the exponential phase. We're going to look at some spreadsheets. In fact, let's look at this one right now. This is membership growth since the beginning of the church until now. And already it's been pretty impressive, right? It's suffered for the last couple years because of the pandemic, but it seems like something incredible is going on right now, or at least that's what President Nelson expects. You can see the trend line right here. It's definitely positive. Here's the number change per year. So like, in other words, like how many people join the church each year. There's a big dip right here in 2020, but it's come back up for 2022. And it'll be exciting to see what happens in the near future. But this trend line is also sloping upward, right? So we also have this thing going on with the missionaries. This is my spreadsheet called Timeline Missionary Work, where I've tried to keep track of significant events in missionary work. So in 2004, the year that I went on my mission, Preach My Gospel was introduced, and we only had about 51,000 missionaries at that time. And then in 2012, President Monson lowered the mission age, and then pursuant to that, we had a large increase or a spike in people going on their missions, which brought the total number to its peak of 85,147 for the year 2014. And then it started to kind of go back down and normalize. But at that point, we didn't go back into the 50s. We stayed in the 70s and 60s. Then we dipped down into the 50s during the pandemic, 2020 and 2021. But a couple years before that, President Nelson introduced the concept of the Lord's Youth Battalion. And he's really been stressing gathering scattered Israel, doing mission work. He's repeated this idea of the Lord's Youth Battalion. And in the April 2022 General Conference, he made a specific request for people to go on their missions. And many other speakers did as well. There was a lot of talk about going on missions during that conference. And it seems like it worked. And people responded. And now we're back up to, as of last year, 72,000. So we're back up into the 70s. President Nelson has talked about the fact that we're in the last half of the ninth inning, that the game is on the line. And it's my personal belief that this is probably the last team to go to bat as far as missionary work goes before the second coming. And they're probably going to be that transition team. What I mean is that missionary work isn't going to just stop at the second coming. It's going to continue. And in case you're confused about what appearance I'm talking about, whatever. Christ coming to the Jews, Christ coming to the world. After that point, there's still going to be missionary work that's done at the beginning of the millennium. And so this group right here that we're looking at, some of them may be part of that group that serves their mission on this side of the second coming and then on the other side of the second coming. I wouldn't be surprised. Look at this right here, column F. This is a tally of General Conference talks that include these words and phrases. And there's something really interesting when we look at the phrase rising generation. So when we go back in time, here, let's go over here. I'll highlight it. So when we go back in time, it comes up every now and again, but nothing really to speak of. There's a lot of years that go by without anybody using the phrase rising generation. But then when you get to 2006, you have it show up in one General Conference talk, and the next year it's 3, and then 2. And then all of a sudden 5 and 7, and it gets used for every year after that. It just becomes like a solid thing where it's mentioned at least once a year, and most of the time, several times a year. So I feel like there's something going on here with the rising generation, lowering of the mission age, the Lord's Youth Battalion, President Nelson's request for people to go on missions, and then now we have the second edition of Preach My Gospel. Okay, so exponential growth is what President Nelson said. We're just at the exponential phase of growth. He said that in 2018. Okay. There's also this is from President Jeffrey R. Holland, president of acting president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. You can find this in this video by KSL. President Holland rededicates historic St. George, Utah temple. And this is at the, well, I actually have it recorded here. This is starting at the 1 minute and 57 second mark. I'll put a link for the video in the description box below. He says, these temples are being built for very large numbers of people to be having their temple experiences and making those covenants and changing the history of the world. And when you listen to the audio, he stresses this word, very. These temples are being built for very large numbers of people. And you know what? I think there's more substance to that because, let's see, where is it? Here it is. I put together this spreadsheet called Temples Member Ratio. Okay, if you just think about it, even just a little bit, and you think about how many temples President Nelson has announced, just using just rough, basic reasoning, you might come to the conclusion, that seems to be more temples than what we would normally have. Like if you had a ratio of members per temple, the church, again, here's the growth of the church right here. And it seems like the number of temples announced exceeds the growth rate of the church. And so I wanted to get down to it and figure out if that was true. So this is what I did. I have, so I have the membership of the church in this column, the number of temples in operation in this column, and then members per temple. So with the first temple, the Kirtland Temple, it was one temple per 13,293 members of the church. The church grew. Okay, and then no more Kirtland Temple. Then we have the Nauvoo Temple, about 30,000 people per one temple. Okay, and then we're driven out of Nauvoo. And then you have the St. George Temple, and at that point, it's 115,000 members of the church per that one temple. And that number went up and up and up, and then it's time to build a new temple. So a second one is built, and now it's down to 79,000 per temple. Okay. And so more temples are announced, and the ratio kind of fluctuates a little bit. It gets to a peak right here in 1918 with 123,000, almost 124,000 per temple. Then it comes back down, and then it starts to go back up, and it looks like it comes to a peak in, well, no, let's move forward. It gets really high in the 70s, all the way up to 258,000 per temple. Then more temples are announced, and those ratios come down. Okay. And so for 2022, we were at 97,000 members per temple. There were 175 operating temples in 2022. So what I did is I took all these years and I took the average ratio. The average ratio of members of the church to temples was 127,154 members of the church per temple. Okay? So that's the average. We can reasonably expect that in the future, the the ratio will continue to be somewhere around this average number, right? So this is what I have right here. So here's 2022, okay? 175 operating temples, 17 million members of the church, and that equals 97,000 members per temple. So if we go down here and we increase the number of operating temples, so say that in 2023, all of a sudden, all the temples that are in operation, announced, and under construction, all of a sudden they're all in operation. Let's say that they're all complete in 2023. In order to maintain, let's look at this one. In order to maintain this ratio of 127,000 members of the church per temple, the church membership would have to increase to 42,596,590 in order to maintain this ratio. Before you say anything, I know that the church, you have different sized temples, right? And it's not like the church is trying to strictly adhere to a certain ratio. This just gives you a general idea. If things continued into the future the way that they have traditionally in the past, then this is about how many members of the church you would have to keep the status quo. You understand? So it seems to indicate that the church expects large growth in the coming future. Otherwise, this ratio is going to be really, really low. I used this number. So instead of 127,000, which is the average for church history, if we just stay at 2022 levels, where it's 97,000 per temple instead of 127,000. So if we just use 2022 as a standard and we plug that number in, then the church would still have to increase. And in this case, it would have to have 32,547,595 members of the church. So either way, the church has got to grow in order to keep things roughly the same. I think otherwise you're going to have understaffed temples. Like, you could make it work, but you have, for example, you have people that aren't old enough to go to the temple. You have people that aren't old enough to get their endowments. You have people that are less active. So you understand, this number includes all the church, all membership, youth, adults, active, less active. So hopefully this isn't too difficult of a concept to comprehend. Just generally speaking, the church would have to increase quite a bit to maintain the status quo, what we've seen for the last 200 years. Okay, so I feel like that's a really good indication. So when we go back to Jeffrey R. Holland and what he said, he says these temples are being built for very large numbers of people to be having their temple experiences. Okay, and then we have this from Brad Wilcox in a YouTube video called Brad Wilcox, 12 Tribes of Israel Breakdown. He said, but when the second coming comes, that's when these tribes are going to give us a totally different organization, a different level of organization that's going to become very important. I mean, right now, we've got to get organized, because when Jesus comes and he says, by the way, I belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that's what he's going to say. So do you think there's going to be a little interest in our church? Oh yeah, we will. Will we be ready to have 2 billion people join the church in one day? Now let me pause right here. I'm sure, well, I can't be sure. That may just be a number that he's throwing out, or it may not. That may be an actual number that the church has talked about. I don't know. But will we be ready to have 2 billion people join the church in one day? Will we have enough stake presidents? Will we have enough bishops? Will we have enough young women presidents? Will we have enough full-time missionaries? Will we have enough full tithe payers? We got to get with it. We got to get organized so that when we have that huge influx into the church, it doesn't swamp us. We've got leaders all over the world who can handle that. So Elder Darling, which is like a hypothetical elder, Elder Darling, you're not going to Guatemala to baptize everybody. Now, that's what your mission president might say, and that's certainly what your zone leader is going to say. But really, you're there just to get things organized, bring people into the church, help them become leaders, help people back into the church, and help them become leaders, help youth become leaders, help other missionaries become leaders. You've got to strengthen this organization so when Jesus comes, that's when we're going to baptize everybody. And we've got to be ready for that. So this is a very practical consideration. The fact that when Christ comes, many people will, those that are true, those that recognize him and recognize truth, they're going to want to join the church, and it's going to be large numbers. I have this spreadsheet called Timeline, Preparing the Church for Second Coming, where I just did, a hypothetical situation where you have Dodge City, Kansas, okay, population 27,788. And let's say that half of them remain after the second coming. We don't know what the percentage is going to be, but let's just say half remain. So that leaves us with 13,894. And let's say that 70% of them want to join the church. So that would be 9,725 people that want to join the church. Here's the standard for stake sizes. Like you have to have 2,000 total members, 500 participating adults, and 150 Melchizedek priesthood holders. That's what you have to have for a stake. And for a ward, 250 total, 100 participating adults, and 20 Melchizedek priesthood holders. So Dodge City, Kansas, if 70% of them that remain want to join the church, this is going to be the ratio. So you're going to have one member of the church for every 39 new people that want to join the church. For adults, it's going to be even worse. It's going to be one adult per 97 people. And for ward Melchizedek priesthood holders in Dodge City, the ratio is going to be 1 to 486. So, yeah, I think we might get swamped pretty easily. Even if it was just instead of 70%, and if it was 50%, you would still have crazy ratios. So we've looked at all these changes that have taken place in the church. There's been a lot of streamlining. There's been a lot of freeing up priesthood holders. And I think one reason for that could be that we need all priesthood holders on deck to perform the ordinances for these new people. You might have lines of people waiting to get baptized. So you need everybody available that can baptize. So when we think about, let's see, where is it? Control F, witness. Okay. In October 2019, it was announced that women, youth, and children may now serve as witnesses of sealing and baptismal ordinances. So in other words, you don't have to have priesthood holders there. They need to be doing other things like performing the ordinances themselves. So it seems to me like they've been freed up for a large number of people in the future. You could see how that might be the case. There's been a lot of other things, but I've done a separate video on that. But there's been a lot of things that seem to indicate that the church is pre-positioning itself for a large influx. Like lots and lots of new things. Freeing up priesthood holders, streamlining things, simplifying things, globalizing things, making it easier for new members to learn about the church. Like, for example, the Saints books that came out, the different volumes of the Saints, that might help somebody get up to speed with what's been going on for the last 200 years. So there's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of stuff to think about. And then I want to go to this. Okay, so we've talked about, so far we've talked about the hinge point. We've talked about we're just at the exponential phase of growth. President Holland said very large numbers of people to have their temple experiences. We looked at what Brad Wilcox said about 2 billion people wanting to join the church at the second coming. And then we have this. This was during the women's session of the April 2022 General Conference. It was a video. The title of this is "You Are the Women He Foresaw." And Sister Camilla Kimball read this on behalf of Spencer W. Kimball because he was in poor health when this was taking place. So President Kimball says, "Much of the major growth that is coming to the church in the last days will come because many of the good women of the world, in whom there is often such an inner sense of spirituality, will be drawn to the church in large numbers. This will happen to the degree that the women of the church reflect righteousness and articulate, oh my gosh, if I can articulateness in their lives, and to the degree that the women of the church are seen as distinct and different in happy ways from the women of the world." And then after that, President Nelson says, "My dear sisters, you who are our vital associates during this winding up scene, the day that President Kimball foresaw is today. You are the women he foresaw. Your virtue, light, love, knowledge, courage, character, faith, and righteous lives will draw good women of the world, along with their families, to the church in unprecedented numbers." So what are some precedented numbers? Let's go back to this spreadsheet. Well, the highest was in 1989 with 587,234. So in order to have unprecedented numbers, you'd have to have more than that, more than 587,000 in a year. And I think that's what's going to happen. And it's because of this that I'm opening it up for anyone that wants to start up a YouTube channel. If you're a woman, okay, if you want to do a channel, it doesn't matter what the topic is, as long as you're talking about the church and it's like from a church point of view. So again, I will interview you to help you get going. This offer is not for already existing channels. I'm trying to get people who have not started a channel. Like if you're on the fence about it, or maybe you haven't even considered doing it before, I'm trying to get you to start a YouTube channel. And so once you do, if you do one of these three things, I will do an interview with you to help introduce you to my audience and hopefully others. So start a channel and do 3 videos a week for 3 weeks for a total of 9 videos, or 5 videos a week for 2 weeks for a total of 10 videos. Or if you really start taking off and you get to 1,000 subscribers, then we can do it at that point too. So if you're interested in that, let me know. We'll have to wait until you reach one of those thresholds and then we can do an interview. But I think it's important. I think that it's important to use this technology and that we use our voices and that we're an example to the world. And that you show the women of the world that you are distinct and different in happy ways, and then they'll be attracted to that. So let's try and promote this. This is just one way that you can do it. Okay, let's see. Was there anything else? Talked about that. Yeah, we talked about all these things. Okay, so yeah, quite a bit has happened in 5 years. I'm really interested to see what's going to happen this next General Conference. I wouldn't be surprised if there's more announcements, changes. Who knows? The sky's the limit. But I think it's going to be a big General Conference. Okay, well, that's going to be it for this one. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.